This is the Moonlight Graham Show, a freewheeling conversation with the role players, the underdogs, and guys with flat-out great stories in sports.
Hello and welcome back to the Moonlight Graham Show, where we celebrate the role players and the underdogs in sports. And happy 2023, everybody. It is a new year, and we're going to be doing something on the podcast today that we've never done before. Now, our Moonlighter for today has a story that's very similar to other folks and other Moonlighters that we've had here on this podcast. He was a great high school athlete. He claims that he had a Division I athletic scholarship that he turned down because he was burnt out. Now, that's a story that we've had here on this podcast before, and frankly, that's a story that's being told in every bar across the United States. The washed-up high school athlete who remembers himself to be a little bit better than he was, and he's probably fudged some facts through the years and now claims that he has a Division I scholarship that he could have accepted if he wasn't so burnt out from the game. Well, the interesting thing about our Moonlighter today, our Moonlighter never pursued a career in sports. And I've talked to folks that say was not only a great athlete back in high school 25 years ago, but he's still a great athlete today. And our Moonlighter for today, his name is a guy by the name of Griffin House. No relation to Tom Griffin. His first name is Griffin, last name House. I believe that's not a stage name, and that's his real name. And so Griffin House turned down an athletic scholarship. He was a great golfer, still is a scratch golfer to this day, turned down a golf scholarship to pursue a career in music. Now, if you're around my age range, right, anywhere in your 30s and 40s, you remember kind of the singer-songwriter era of the late 90s, the early 2000s. Guys like John Mayer, guys like Jason Mraz were coming out of that time, and it seemed like everybody was kind of going back to the singer-songwriter time of the 60s and the 70s, where you'd have these one-man guitar guys in the post-grunge, post-boy band era where they were making this singer-songwriter comeback. Well, Griffin House was in that era, and he was one of my guys. I have been listening to Griffin House, whether you've heard of him or not. I've been listening to him for the last 20 plus years. How I got introduced to Griffin House, I actually tip of the cap to my older brother, Andy. My older brother, Andy, is a good musician in his own right, and he's always been kind of a tastemaker, at least for me, when it comes to music, because I've never been the music nerd that my brother Andy is, and so I would always just steal his CDs, steal his records. He would make me mixtapes of things that he thought I might like. And I remember the mixtape he made me after he went to college. It was with all these new artists. You know, when people go to college, of course, they have to have all these new artists that they're being exposed to. And so to me, being still in high school at the time, I thought all of it was so cool. And one of the artists that had 2 songs on that mixtape from my brother Andy was Griffin House. And I immediately loved it. And I immediately put Griffin House into my list of top tier artists, and he's stayed there, of course, because really people's music tastes don't change over time. They just become older. He has stayed one of my favorite artists over the past 20 plus years now. I've seen Griffin House 5 times in concert. I own every one of his albums. I own 3 of his shirts. So I'm a Griffin House supporter. And as fate would have it, a Moonlighter out there, Don Appleby, who you guys well know, he was in that swimming episode, 1984 Rosemont High School swimming episode that we did. Don Appleby is connected to Griffin House and has golfed with him. And so about a month ago, Don, being the great supporter of the Moonlight Graham Show he connected Griffin House and I through text message, and here we are to have this episode on Griffin House. And we have never had a professional musician here on the podcast. Griffin House is a total underdog musician. Now, he's had some of his songs have been on movies, have been on shows. Of course, his songs get played on the radio or in the background of some commercial that you'll see out there. But, you know, for the majority of people, you probably don't know who Griffin House is. And so I'm excited to bring this to our audience because he's this guy that every one of his songs feels like it's autobiographical to me. Like, he's obviously a Midwestern guy. He writes and he sings about stuff that seems to relate to the everyman like myself and like many of you that are out there. And I've really always admired him, and I've also been surprised that he's never really hit the big time in the way that fans expect someone to hit the big time. And so I wanted to talk to him about what's it like being a working musician. Now, he's hit the big time in that he's never had to have a real job. He's still an act that goes around all the country. He gets packed houses wherever he goes. He's got a really nice following, but he's not a pop star. He's never made it big on America's Got Talent or The Voice or anything like that, or American Idol. And he's just this working musician that continues to put out great music time after time. And he's a really, really great songwriter. So not only do we have a great interview with Griffin House, and I was really excited to do this episode, but also we're going to feature some of his music in this episode as well, some of my personal favorites. And I think you guys are going to really, really enjoy this episode. It's something new. It's something different. And I think you guys will enjoy it here on the Moonlight Graham Show. Special thanks, of course, to my brother Andy, who cued me into Griffin House 20-some years ago. Special thanks to Donnie Appleby as well for making this happen. And special thanks to Griffin House. Enjoy today's episode with Moonlighter, Griffin House.
Legend says our family tree grows black and white and Indian leaves. And if the history books are right, none of us are really white. In fact, I think that means that everybody's blood is just the same. Whoa, it feels so good to have your blood in my veins. Ooh, it feels so good to have your blood in my veins.
This is a sports podcast, and the first line of your Wikipedia, there is a claim out there that you turned down a golf scholarship in college to pursue music. Now, there's a lot of people in the sports world especially that claim they turned down athletic scholarships. How much truth is there to that story?
I did turn one down, but it wasn't really to pursue music. It was just because I was burnt out with golf, and the NCAA was kind of described to me as really owning you for all 4 years you were there. And the school wasn't my first choice. So I was kind of, I just wasn't feeling like that was my path. And I wanted to go to school and kind of reinvent myself. And I had no idea that I would be playing music for a living, but I just kind of found that as I went away to school.
So are you telling me that if you lived in like the modern day, right?
Yeah.
Like today, and there was NIL money and you could control some of your own path, would you have been a college golfer?
I don't know. I don't know if I knew what I knew now. It would have been fun to be able to do both lives, but I know that I would never be playing music if I hadn't gone the path that I did. So I think I was meant to do that. I miss sometimes the competition of playing, and I still love playing golf now, but I really didn't like it much when I quit. I was really like disappointed with my ability to kind of perform under pressure. Especially when we had like a big event. I would always seem to have like a one-day tournament that was important, and I would not play my best, and it would just drive me nuts. So I was glad to have a break from that, because I put a lot of pressure on myself, and then, music was just a whole different world. So it'd be nice to think, you could explore different paths, but you can only kind of pick one. So I think it was good that I did it.
How long did it take you to get over the burnout of golf and come back to the game and just enjoy it again?
I really feel like I quit altogether being interested in it at all for years and years and years. I mean, I think I'd only play like a handful of times just for fun and not take it too seriously, like after I'd quit for several years. And I never really wanted to work on it again. And then I actually started to find it again. I got interested somehow again, maybe around 2010. And ironically, I had quit drinking that year, and I needed something to do with all the extra time and energy that I had. And I lived at a golf course, or I lived near a golf course, a public course in Nashville. And it seemed like the only way I could really burn off steam was to go hike around the hills of that golf course and play a bunch of golf and just kind of reconnect with the person I was probably before I started drinking. And so I think that's why I went back to what it was like as a kid, which was playing a lot of golf alone. And I had sort of a way of connecting spiritually with myself that way. And then I kind of got the bug again and got a little bit obsessed with golf again. And now I really enjoy it. It's something that I can still be hard on myself about that, but I kind of enjoy the journey of kind of searching to get better all the time.
Mm-hmm. So in sports, a lot of times we talk about, who are the role models, who guys model their game off of, whether it's baseball, basketball, golf. In music, who have you modeled your career off of? Or are there other artists that you've tried to steal from and learn from?
Well, I've recently reconnected with the band U2 because that was like the first time that I had any inkling that I wanted to do music. And I had watched Rattle and Hum as a kid. And so I kind of became obsessed with Bono when I was a teenager. And they really inspired. He was a role model for sure for me. I can't say that I could model my career after that because my career has been so dramatically different. But because I'm a solo artist for one, and I was always envious of what it would be like to have being a band with three guys that you're best buddies with and you grew up together, and that's pretty magical. But I even stopped listening to them for a long time, but I picked up his biography off the shelf recently, and if I had one role model, it probably would have been him. But I learned to just find inspiration wherever I could. I was really influenced by the Billy Bragg and Wilco Mermaid Avenue albums, and Jeff Buckley, and later Johnny Cash, and definitely Bob Dylan, Leonard Cohen, people that really dug deep lyrically, for sure. Because I think when you're writing a song alone with an acoustic guitar, the songs that tend to stick around are the ones where the lyrics are really good, because you're limited with what you can do musically. So if you only have a few chords to play and one simple instrument, the lyrics kind of have to be good. So
yeah, I'm really curious about the songwriting process. And that's one thing that's always drawn me to your music is your music is very autobiographical, but it connects with me. And so many of your songs feel like they're autobiographical for my life, Mm-hmm. And then when I watch the Beatles Get Back record or the documentary, and I see how those guys write songs, and I watched a recent video on the Rolling Stones, how they came away with Sympathy of the Devil, how they wrote the music for that. It was a much different process than I would have anticipated, and maybe a much different process than what a solo artist working with an acoustic guitar goes through. So what is your process like for writing music?
My process is really to sit down with an instrument and find something that sounds interesting, whether it's a groove or a simple melody, and then try to find some phrases or words that work well, and then just kind of build it from the ground up that way. And once in a while I'll get something in my head that's really repeatable to where I can go sit down somewhere with a pen and a paper and just write the lyrics out, because I'll have the main melody in my head. But more often than not, it's just kind of sitting with the instrument and working out a song until it comes to you, and recording moments of inspiration where it seems like it's flowing out of you pretty well, and then trying to kind of knock off the pieces that don't work and keep what does work. So it all kind of works together, and you're just kind of almost following clues or little signposts that lead you in a direction of a song trying to reveal itself.
how long are you working on a song? Like tweaking the verbiage or tweaking lyrics here and there? Like how long does that process take typically?
It really just depends on the song. I mean, I've written songs in an afternoon where I knew it was going to be more like a lyrical piece where it was just all about the words and I didn't have to worry about the music very much. And I knew once I had all the verse that it was done, and I could spend a day on that, and then, maybe a few tweaks here and there later, but it would happen really quickly. And then I've had other songs where I've had a guitar part or a melody laying around for years and I haven't found the right words for it. So it's amazing how it can either happen all very quickly in a short amount of time, or it can take a really long time to work on.
Who's the songwriter in music that just continuously blows you away by the lyrics?
Bob Dylan is the best to me. I've recently discovered more of Gordon Lightfoot's work, and I really admire him as a songwriter as well. I didn't really know about him when I was growing up, and it was funny because people would compare me to him, and I'd never listened to his music before. So once I watched his documentary this last year, and I really related to him, and it actually made me like what I do more, because he was just kind of a guy with an acoustic guitar too, and played a 12 string, and he seemed to come up with some really amazing stuff. And I haven't always been completely secure with doing what I do, because I never really set out to be like a solo artist with an acoustic guitar, because that was not really who my role models were. So I wasn't really emulating anybody. I was just I fell into doing what I'm doing because of circumstances, really. And I wanted to keep playing music, but it wasn't really ideally what I envisioned myself doing. I probably saw myself a little bit more hyper and bombastic and running around the stage with a microphone and being more of a front man role, but that's just not really the way that it turned out. So it turned out I was more of a writer.
In sports, we always talk about everybody's got a walk-up song, like Mariano Rivera, right? He comes out to Metallica, right? Some of these famous walk-out. If you were shortstop for the Yankees, what's your walk-up song?
Probably Thunderstruck.
Okay. That's not what I was expecting, but I like that.
Yeah, I love AC/DC. I find when I'm listening to them, when I go on runs, it's like I didn't really listen to them coming up either, but I learned to appreciate them over the years. And I love putting on their records and just feeling like I'm literally getting a jolt of electricity from their music. It's so amazing how it can do that.
I was just looking at your tour schedule yesterday, and the thing that resonates with me is like, that looks like a minor league baseball tour schedule, right? Like your life resonates with like professional athletes because you guys have similar travel schedules. What's your least favorite and also favorite city to visit on the tour schedule?
I don't know if I have a least favorite. I know I love being out in the Pacific Northwest, though. I always get really psyched when I go out to Seattle for some reason. I just love being there. I love that environment. I have a nice little neighborhood that I like to hang out in, but typically I really like going out west because it's so different than where I grew up. I feel like I'm far away from home in sort of a magical land, and I'm on a little bit more of an adventure when I'm out there. So anywhere out west of the Mississippi is really interesting to me. But I love touring all over the country. There's so many good spots, and a lot of times venues, it's not so much about the city, it's about the actual venue that I'm playing in the city. And sometimes little venues pop up in the most unexpected places. Like I have a place that's one of my favorite venues to play in LaSalle, Illinois, and I've probably played there 20 times. And it's not a place you would ever think that you would be drawn to going to play, but it's this little venue in a small town about 2 hours outside of Chicago. And I've had some of the best nights of my career there playing for that small town. So it's just, and then lots of times venues turn over, so you have a place that works for a while, but then maybe they shut down, or the place changes. So you have to find a new place to play. And there's lots of good ones out there, though. I feel fortunate to have been able to play a lot of them over the years.
So my best buddy went to one of your shows in Denver a few years back, and for that show, he told me before we got on here, you essentially passed a notepad around the crowd and said, "Hey, if you've got any requests, I'll play them." And my buddy came up with a Griffin House deep cut because we've been followers of yours since the early 2000s. How often do you do something like that where you're just like, "Hey, tonight's going to be different, and we're going to listen to the crowd, and the concert, the show could go whatever direction it goes"?
Inevitably, when I ask people for requests, they'll call out like the 3 songs that I haven't played in like 10 years. And so I've kind of learned that's a bad idea. But I generally do take requests from the stage, especially if I'm feeling a little more like I want to have some spontaneity. But people will call out a lot of different songs, so I can kind of pick and choose from the ones that they call out and just kind of choreograph my own set list. But yeah, I try to keep every night unique. There are times when I play like a double header in a town. Sometimes, like in Atlanta at Eddie's Attic, I play 2 shows in one night sometimes, and often I'll try to go as long as I can without repeating a song from the first set in case a couple people stay. So I have a big enough body of work to be able to do that pretty easily. So I try to keep it interesting for everyone. And although I tell a lot of the same stories that fit the songs, I always try to add a little special twist to it so that it's not like I'm reading from a script, but I'm just kind of letting each night be special.
What's your most common cover song?
Good question. The last one I've played Wicked Game by Chris Isaak a little bit over the years. I hardly do any covers though. It's and that's not really because I don't want to, but oftentimes within a 90-minute set, I'll throw a cover in, and I get feedback from the audience of like, "Hey, you didn't play this song, or you didn't play this song of yours, and the cover was good, but I'd rather hear I came to hear your music," So the covers can be fun for me, and but I've kind of learned from people's feedback to just like get as many of the songs I think people might want to hear and of my own as possible. So I find myself rarely playing them.
Are there any songs that you've written that you don't want to play because they cut too deep?
Not because they cut too deep, but there were a few over the years. Like I tell the story at shows. Like I wrote this song called Colleen that I thought was just so silly, and I just didn't feel like it was matching the other content of my shows, especially before. I've written some more songs with more humor in them over the last 10 years or so, and they work well in my set to kind of balance out some of the more heavy songs. But at the time I wrote that, it was like really one of the only kind of just silly songs that I had, and I learned over the years that people actually really enjoyed that, but I shied away from playing it for a while because it just almost felt like I was not taking it seriously enough, or just being too dumb. But I've realized over the years that the crowd really enjoys laughing as well as crying, so I enjoy the laughter part a lot, and I try to inject as much humor as possible. But no, I kind of enjoy playing those now.
A lot of times with folks that we have here on this podcast, you'll get like a young up and coming athlete that all of a sudden is on the NBA team with the guy that he idolized growing up, who's now 35, 38 years old, they're starstruck and they're teammates. Has there ever been anyone in the music industry that you're a peer with that all of a sudden you're starstruck by?
Probably not a peer, but I guess, I met Jewel. I don't consider her a peer because I grew up watching her on MTV and VH1 when I was a kid, but she's probably the closest one to my age. She's, I don't know how old she is, but probably at least 10 years older than I am. But I loved singing on stage with Jewel, and it was I did a cover song with her a couple of nights when I was touring with her. And when I look back at the video of that, it's like, wow, I can't believe I got to sing with somebody like that I grew up watching. But over the years, I've opened for people like that I saw on TV as a kid, like John Mellencamp, and I met Willie Nelson and Bruce Springsteen early on in my career, and that was always a pretty wild thing to me, that you could go have a dream to go play music and go do it, and then all of a sudden you're hanging out with these people that are just almost larger than life. It's almost like you weren't sure they existed or not, and then you get to be in their company. It's a special feeling.
What are the Boss and Willie like?
So cool. Bruce was very generous and really generous with his time and his with his soul with me. He was really fun to talk to, and I had some really nice moments with him on that tour that I was not expecting. I didn't even know that I was going to meet him when I went to go open for his wife, but he was just a great guy and made a lot of time for me and also my family. After another time I took my uncle, who introduced me to his music, and we saw him in Cincinnati, and he talked to us for like probably 20 minutes right before he went on stage. We were just in his dressing room alone with him, and that was pretty cool of him to do. And Willie was great. It was funny. I called my grandfather from Austin, Texas, the first time I was down at South by Southwest, and he asked me what I did the night before, and I said, "Oh, I smoked some marijuana." And he was like, "What?" And I said, "With Willie Nelson." He goes, "Oh, that's great!" Like, it was a lifetime achievement. I was like, "Well, me and probably thousands of other people." But it was funny because I met Willie's son Lucas at a golf tournament. Actually, it was a charity golf tournament this summer, and I kind of told him that story, and that was funny to be able to do that. But that family, it seems a really great bunch of people. So both he and Lucas were really nice.
One thing that's really connected with me over the years through your songs is you always tie in your faith, and you've mentioned faith a couple of times in our conversation here today. But what I'm amazed by is whether it's Waiting on the Rain to Come Down or some of the other songs that you've had, the one that I always go back to is your song about Judas. And it's like, man, it took some balls to write that song. And whenever you're writing a song that has, like, biblical references in it, Judas being a big one, it carries some weight of like, hey, I got to make sure I'm not like doing anything blasphemous here as well. Like, when you're writing a song like that and you're trying to tie in your faith and you don't want it to sound like a cheesy Christian rock song, like, do those songs take longer or what was the intent behind those, or how do you come up with hitting the right note there?
I was around a lot of people in Nashville that seemed like they had kind of close ties to the Christian music industry. And I really didn't want any part of that. And I probably rebelled a little too hard against that sometimes, because I wanted to be taken seriously as an artist. I didn't want to be kind of pigeonholed into a genre. And also I didn't want to take advantage of the fact that I could have probably played into that and just, really claimed my faith more, and then tried to garner a bunch of fans by waving the banner of God. And I probably went a little too hard in the other direction sometimes, but Judas was more of a really genuine attempt to ask some hard questions about the Bible and predestination and free will, and really try to understand, like, hey, if God kind of knows the plan and he knows what's going to happen, somebody had to kind of play this role in my mind. So how's that all work? And just a lot of questions and mental gymnastics of trying to understand how that all works. And it was funny because that you mentioned that song, because I didn't go to church a whole lot in Nashville when we lived there for the 10 years that we were there, but my family and I found this nice little community church down the road from where we live. And one of the guys who runs the Bible study there wanted to do a Bible study around my song Judas. So he invited me to Bible study a couple of weeks ago, and I sat there as they analyzed my song. And I'd say like 90% of the people there were like really interested in, the whole idea of it without any defensive language at all. And then there was one person that seemed like, oh no, like nobody had to be that guy. Like that guy's wrong, and yet there's forgiveness for him. And I'm like, no, I think somebody did actually have to be him. So it's really, there's no easy answers for that. But I thought it was really neat that that song came full circle, and I'm sitting in a Bible study discussing it over, at a church, which was really cool. And there was definitely never any attempt to, I was definitely careful about not wanting to seem irreverent. And not irreverence is the wrong word. I guess blasphemous would be the right thing, but I was sensitive to that. But I also knew that my questioning was coming from a genuine place of spirituality and curiosity, not trying to, upset anyone on purpose.
Well, I think the reason why I keep going back to it is because it's just one of those millennial long questions of free will. Like they're going to be debating that question forever. And you kind of leave it hanging there at the end of the song. And that's why it always draws me back to it, because, that debate's constantly happening. Waiting on the rain to come down is one that I've used in retreats. Like for whatever reason, like that one always just connects with me, just, washing away sins. And, we're all sinners and we all have a chance for repentance and forgiveness. And that's kind of what I get. It just feels like by the time you're done listening to that song, you feel renewed. You feel like you've been forgiven of some stuff. And I like that.
Yeah, me too. I enjoy playing it. Same reason.
So going back to kind of our questions about tying in sports to your career, the first song of Balls, your Balls album is called Fenway.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Fenway with, you're buying a ticket to go to a Red Sox game at Fenway Park. Best ballpark you've ever been to?
I've never been there. I would like to go.
You lied.
Never been to Fenway. Well, you gotta lie. You got sometimes to tell the truth in songwriting. You gotta make stuff up. And I remember reading. I was introduced to this concept of like fiction in somewhere in high school. Probably we read Tim O'Brien's The Things They Carried, and he had a statement in there that sometimes fiction does a better job of telling the truth than actual fact does. And I was like, what? That doesn't make any sense. And then as I became a writer of my own, I realized that sometimes that's true, because when you're trying to get to the bottom of an emotion, or you're trying to express yourself in a certain way, you kind of have to just go where your subconscious is leading you and tell a story. Stories get embellished all the time from stage, but it's sort of like it can almost make them more true sometimes by capturing the feeling that you're trying to evoke, rather than just making it more interesting. I think that's just what we do as storytellers.
Well, you got me. You suckered me in. I see Fenway on there. I was like, well, I'm buying the album now, because he obviously saw a game in Fenway, and I'm into that.
Yeah, I've been to Wrigley a few times.
Yeah, right up there.
Sounded good to sing Fenway.
Yeah, you know what? Well, this is my tip to you then, Griffin. Now that you are in Connecticut, get to Fenway Park. Wrigley is great. Fenway blows it away.
I'm sure it does.
Yeah. So one time I was in Minneapolis with my buddy. We're at a Griffin House show, and then we stay in there. We're doing the encore. Does every show have an encore? Is this a thing where, like, we know they're going to come out every time, or do you ever just say, nope, I'm done, and you drop the mic and you don't come back, no matter how many times the crowd is cheering for you?
I don't really like the encore, because really for that reason, I think people can, especially when it's a solo act, it's hard to tell sometimes, because people have been they're usually so respectful the whole night, and they're so quiet and so polite, and they don't always feel free to just make a bunch of, go from making no noise to making a bunch of noise if you walk off stage. So generally what I do is I tell people when I know I have about 20 minutes left that, hey, I'm not going to do that thing where I walk off stage and pretend like I'm not going to come back out. So we'll just begin the encore now, and I'll play a few more songs, and we can have some extra time that way. And that way I don't have to do that whole charade. So that's usually what I do.
Yeah, but how often do you actually do an encore then? If you don't say that, like, have you ever done like a real authentic encore? Like you weren't planning on
Yeah.
it, but the
Yeah.
crowd brought you back.
And that still happens sometimes too, where I'll say I'm done, or I'll make that statement of like, hey, I'm not going to do the thing where I go off stage and I'm not going to come back, but I'll play the last 3 or 4 songs, and then I'll really think I'm done, and the crowd stands up and cheers, and then I'll play 1 or 2 more. So that happens, but it kind of has to happen naturally for me. I don't like when it feels like now I'm going to try to go backstage and fake you out, and if I don't come out unless I think you've clapped loud enough, I don't really like that game. So
yeah, I don't like it when artists save like 2 of their best songs for the encore too. It's like we've been waiting all night for those 2. Why don't you just play them in the middle?
Right. Exactly.
So when you empty the chamber and you got to come back out for the encore, how do you know what to play?
That can be a challenge sometimes, but luckily I have so many songs I can usually figure one out, because my set list kind of changes every night. So if I get surprised with one, I'll just pick one that got left off the set list that night and play that one. I've got quite a few that work for that situation, so it's generally not a problem.
Who is the artist that you'll buy a ticket for?
I went to go see David Byrne on Broadway, which was really fantastic. I love the Talking Heads, and that show was really great. And I bought a ticket to go see Roger Waters do Dark Side of the Moon a few years back, which was really good. But it takes a lot to get me out of the house. I have to feel really inspired to go spend a night in a venue when I'm used to spending all my nights in venues. So those are the last 2 I can think of.
Have there been any athletes that you've watched that feel like artists to you? Like that terminology is used a lot of time by sports announcers that have no idea about music or art. It's like, this guy's an artist out there. It's like, well, or he's 6'9" and more talented than everybody else on the field. But have you watching it, like seeing like that guy can tell he's an artist in what he's doing?
I never got to see him play, but I'm pretty fascinated with Ben Hogan's story in golf, and I think he was an artist. I think he was just such a hard worker, but I think he loved it in the same way that I get lost in songwriting. I can feel that, and I've been lost in practicing that way too myself, and I can sense some familiar territory there with him. So I would have loved to have been around when he was alive, but I was a huge Fred Couples fan too when I was a kid. Just the way that he worked his way around the golf course, he always seemed a little bit more of creative and a little bit more of a field player and more of an artist that way. I'm trying to think of guys I liked in baseball that seemed like an artist, because I played a lot of baseball as a kid too. But like Seve Ballesteros, that guy was definitely an artist on the golf course. Yeah. So I like those guys a lot and relate to them.
So in baseball, you look back at somebody's baseball card and it says like, they spent 3 years in the minors, then they spent 10 years in the majors, and then they retired and became a coach, and then now they're in the Hall of Fame. If we were to look at the Griffin House baseball card, like what does that say in like sports terms? Is it like Griffin, spent parts of 5 major league seasons in the majors, and is, and he's like Crash Davis from Bull Durham, and he's got the minor league record for home runs, or like what's the Griffin House sports analogy connecting to your music career?
Man, all of that is so much about perspective, and I'm probably like the last one that should comment on that, because I think I made a movie about this documentary called Rising Star a few years ago, and it was pretty clear that the way that I thought about myself for a long time was that I'd never really made it out of the minor leagues. And I think other people can validate that when it's like, I can be playing a sold out show in New York City, and people will come and say like, oh, you're really going to make it one day. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? You're in a sold out show in New York City, And then I have a friend whose father played in the symphony in New York, and he was a professional musician for decades. And he made it, as a musician, he made a living doing it. And I've learned, lately to go like, no, you're not in the minor leagues. Like you're definitely in the major leagues because you've made a living at doing what you love for a really long time. And just because you're not playing stadiums doesn't mean that. It's not always about the numbers. It's kind of about the quality of what you feel like you're giving night to night, and the connection, the level of connection that you have with the people that are there to see you. And in that sense, I definitely feel like it's really different than the quantitative comparison of a baseball card, but it's a lot about perspective, just kind of what you value. And I definitely value all of the moments that I've been, blessed to have over the years with audiences. So I consider that a major win.
Well, I totally agree. And I really appreciate you doing this, right around Christmas. I know you're busy, probably have a lot of family stuff going on, but like I said before, been a fan for over 20 years now, and it's just a real treat to talk with you. So thank you for putting out great music. Thank you for continuing to do shows and allow fans like me to come out and see you. And thanks for coming on the Moonlight Graham Show. And Merry Christmas too, Griffin.
Great name for the show too, by the way. I love it. Field of Dreams, amazing movie.
Well,
Always gets
me too. Have you ever been there?
No, I need to go sometime. That would be so great.
Next time you're coming through Iowa, and if you got an extra day and you're driving through, shoot me a text. We'll go to the Field of Dreams and we'll play catch together.
That'd be pretty good. I would love that. Well, thank you for today. Great questions too. I really enjoyed it.
You bet. Well, take care, Griffin, and have a Merry Christmas.
All right. Merry Christmas, Tim.
See you, man. Thank you for listening to the episode with Griffin House. And you know what? Happy New Year, everybody. I hope 2022 was a great year for you. And I hope 2023 is going to be an even better year for you and your family. I hope you've got big goals. I hope you got big sights and aspirations. And I hope that January is not just a New Year's resolution month for you, but whatever goals and dreams and aspirations that you have for this year, I hope that you're able to sustain the pursuit of those dreams all throughout this year and not just in this week or this month of the year. So we've had my man Griffin House on the pod. This one was fun for me. And the song that I want to highlight as we wrap things up is a song called Waiting on the Rain to Come Down. And this is a song that really has not been one of my favorite songs for the entire time that I've liked Griffin House, but it's a song that really connected with me when I was going through a dark time in my life. And whether that's you right now, or whether you've ever been to therapy before, you've ever been to a retreat where you're thinking like, man, I am not the person, I'm not the guy to go to therapy, or I'm not the person to go to a retreat. I remember when I did it for the first time, I was embarrassed. I felt like I didn't belong there, of course, because my pride and my ego were getting in the way. But both of those things really, really helped me when I was going through a hard time. And as part of the retreat, and it was a church retreat, so it was faith-based, as part of that, we had to tell our witness and, share a lot about ourselves. A lot of that made me uncomfortable at the time. But we had to attach a song to it. And some people picked songs like AC/DC, Highway to Hell, like they were living a sinful life and they're on the highway to hell. Or some people just picked their favorite song, whether it was their walkout song or college or their first dance with their wife. Well, anyway, the song that I played was Griffin House's Waiting on the Rain to Come Down. And if you guys listen to this, whether it's on this podcast or check out Griffin House on Spotify or on YouTube, this was a song that really kind of connected with me about where I was at that time and really helped me move forward from the things that I was dealing with at that time. And so not only have I loved every one of Griffin House's albums, but this song in particular always hits a special spot for me because it takes me back to those retreats and to when I was going through therapy for some stuff. And it's like, I remember how dark it felt at that time. And I'm not giving this song all the credit here because it was a lot of other things that helped me get past that. But this song is what reminds me of it. So if you guys are going through a tough time or you're starting off with a fresh slate here in 2023, take a listen to this song or find your own song, find your own anthem for this year, and let it be that song that always gives you that sense of hope that, hey, even though the times are dark right now, they're going to get better. Sunny days are ahead. I love you.
Wash away my sins, Lord. Cleanse me in the rain. Let your holy thunder take away my pain. Let me cry some tears, Lord. Heal my sorry eyes. Dark and dry as deserts, baking in the lies. Calm me in your breeze, hold me in your arms. I've fallen in a sin-filled world and idolized its charms, waiting for the rain to come down. My heart is prone to wander, Lord, through a marketplace of greed. Free my mind from worry, and I'll follow if you lead. I'm like a child on the inside, God, but guilty of the crime. Your innocence remains in me when you strip away the grime. Devils crawl around my house and underneath my skin. I'm ashamed that when sin knocked, I chose to let it in. While I was waiting for the rain to come down, waiting for the love to light, waiting for the rain to come down and set me right. I'm waiting for the rain to come down. Along the way, I fall behind. I wonder every day, am I still on your mind? And I don't have a reason to go on if we're apart. And I don't have the keys to open up your heart. While I'm waiting on the rain to come down, waiting for the love to start, waiting on the rain to come down and fill my heart. I'm waiting on the rain to come down, waiting for the love to light, waiting for the rain to come down and set me right, waiting for the rain to come down. I've made you vows and promises, and I've meant to follow through the things inside my heart that I have failed to do. You're welcome in my life, Lord, welcome in my home, welcome in my heart, Lord, but still I feel alone. I'm in need of your direction, in need of tenderness. Shelf my pride forever, God, and get me through the test. While I'm waiting on the rain to come down, waiting for the love to rest, waiting on the rain to come down, I'm doing my best. I'm waiting on the rain to come down, I'm waiting for the love to light, waiting on the rain to come down and set me right. While I'm waiting on the rain to come down. While I'm waiting on the rain to come down. I'm waiting for the rain to come down.